Now there's all kinds of different people in this world. There's only one pie.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Team Made Apart podcast, the podcast designed to teach those who work remotely and those who hire them how to work better together. I'm your host, Ryan Rogar. Before we get started, as always, today's show is brought to you by teammadeapart.com. Team Made Apart features articles, tools, and resources designed to teach remote workers and those who hire them how to work better together. A community for owners, managers, leaders, freelancers, contractors, and all variety of remote worker, Team Made Apart is also a terrific resource for companies interested in implementing remote work policies in otherwise co-located environments, or for those planning to build fully distributed organizations from the jump. Listeners of this podcast have an exciting opportunity to get involved in the remote work revolution. In light of current events related to the coronavirus pandemic and a sudden worldwide shift to remote work, we're offering a free remote work best practices guide for leaders who find themselves struggling to create a remote work policy in a pinch. Now, and for the duration of the crisis, visit teammadeapart.com/crisis to not only download your free Team Made Apart Remote Policy Primer, how to write remote work policies that don't suck, but to find other tools and resources to help you weather the storm. Great working relationships make for great remote work experiences, and with this free guide, you'll be better equipped to do your part in creating and maintaining a happy and sustainable remote life. Once again, to take advantage of this collection of useful resources, please visit teammadeapart.com/crisis, that is teammadeapart.com/crisis, to download your free Best Practices Guide. One more thing before we kick off the show. Now, and for the foreseeable future, teammadeapart.com is offering free support and advice to remote workers and remote leaders alike through Team Made Apart Open Office. From noon to 2 p.m. Mountain Time, Monday through Friday, you can visit teammadeapart.com and navigate to the bottom left-hand corner of the page where you'll find a chat icon. Simply click it and you'll be connected to a real, remote work expert who is happy to help you solve problems in real time at no charge to you. Of course, you can use the same tool 24/7, 365 to ask questions or request services, but during open office hours, you've got a direct line of communication to people who care and people who can help. Once again, from noon to 2 p.m. Mountain Time, Monday through Friday, simply navigate to teammadeapart.com, find our chat icon in the bottom left-hand corner of the page, then click for instant support when you need it at no cost to you. Take advantage of this special program while it lasts, and now, back to the show. Today's special guest is Erin Westover. Erin is the market lead for Europe at Upflex, a global co-working leader who combines technology, the largest network of workspaces, and a recognized workplace safety program to help businesses be agile, efficient, and safe, especially in these uncertain times. In her role at Upflex, Erin helps companies transition their workforce from static and mundane to flexible and inspiring by hand-selecting some of the most unique and energizing spaces available, ensuring that teams can access the perfect work environment no matter where they are. She believes that in a world full of technology that has only enhanced our innate longing for connectedness, being a part of an industry that is building and curating communities that bring people together is extraordinarily impactful. Here to talk about all that and more, join me in welcoming our guest, Erin Westover.
Hey, Erin, thanks so much for doing the show. We're so excited to have you here. And I've got to say, I mean, you're one of the very first people when I started doing any of this, what we're calling remote work advocacy, that was willing to hop on the phone with me. And honestly, it happened pretty quickly. And so I'm super grateful to have you here as a part of the podcast, given that you were, one of the first people I spoke to in the space. So thank you so much and welcome.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm, of course, always willing to talk to other people who are advocating remote work. It's good to see what's going on out there, especially when you have a bunch of people that are dispersed around the world. So, of course, always happy to talk to you.
Well, yeah, it seems like such an interesting time in sort of the remote work sphere, as if we're almost hitting this kind of crossroads where it's finally reaching a level of, I guess, sort of, acceptance that it's now becoming a thing in corporations. Although people have been doing this for 20 or 30 years, I feel like now is kind of the sweet spot to be involved in it. So I'm grateful for experts like you and the other people who've done this show being so willing to share their information, because it's just, I think it's a great time to be involved in this world.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
So cool. So let's just kind of roll into this thing and tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got started in remote.
Okay, so I do like telling this story because it's kind of something that I've identified in the last few years, and my story kind of starts back in university, with, of course, like the way that you study. I was a science major, so I was constantly at the library, and I really hated to sit at a desk, so I was always sitting around on the floor and moving into different rooms every day to try to reinvigorate some kind of inspiration to study. So I think that that's kind of where it came from because I've always been a little bit unconventional with my approach to work. And so, of course, I studied science and then I worked in a lab. So I was never really sitting at a desk fully. Um, and then when I kind of went into my professional life, it ended up that I did have a 9 to 5 job for a few years that I wasn't really able to adjust to. I tried very desperately, but I just had this, of course, this emptiness inside. Like, is that all there is, kind of thing? You know, you're on your way commuting via train. And so I slowly just figured out a way to set my life up so that I could work from home whenever I needed to. And then, of course, like my job just kind of shifted in that direction, and I learned to ask more from my employers. And I found that they were willing to give it to me if they found the work was getting done. So that's kind of how I started out. Was just asking for more and being able to travel, and again, just having deadlines and being able to demonstrate that I could do my job outside of the realm of 9 to 5. So yeah, and that's kind of led me to where I am today, where I think it's going to be very difficult to find my way back to the 9 to 5.
Yeah, no, that seems to be the story with most of the people I'm talking to is that, you know, once they sort of found their way out, they don't want to go back. And so I think that makes perfect sense. So tell me though about your earlier employer. I mean, at the time you were pushing for remote work and this opportunity to work away from the office, what was your employee or employer's take on that stuff? Like, I mean, did you already have like a great working relationship? They trusted you. It was like a no-brainer to allow you to do it? Or was there a little bit of a trial period there?
Oh no, there was always pushback. So that's something that I know a lot of people struggle with is asking, right, for something from your employer. You just kind of want to fall in line and do everything as you're supposed to. And again, a lot of employers want to be able to accommodate the needs of their employees, right? And it's just that people don't feel that they can ask for things or that they might be pushing the boundaries too much. I never feel that way. I ask for everything. Because the worst case scenario, they're going to say no, and then I have to go back to the drawing board. So I'm always aiming for the no, right? Because you're that one step closer to a yes. So that's my sales background coming in. But with that employer in particular, they kind of had to accommodate. Like I had a very specific situation where I was traveling a lot. I was doing expansion for a company here in Germany. We expanded to New York City. And we were working and co-working at the time and meeting offices. And I was on my own a lot. So I spent time in New York City and I spent time at co-working spaces. And so I had to kind of adjust my own schedule. Of course, they are 6 hours ahead in Germany when you're located in North America and EST time. So I just got to do it on my own schedule. And that's where I started getting into my own rhythm. And then when I came back to Germany, then I would just ask for more and say, hey, I need a few days, at home. I'm working on a different time schedule. And slowly they kind of allowed it. But I was always a unique outlier in most of the group because, again, people were afraid to ask for those opportunities.
Were your employers like impressed by results? Did they see these performance gains and things like that are sort of touted around in this remote workspace? We always talk about, you know, how highly productive remote workers are and stuff. Like, do you think that some of that fed their ability to sort of continually trust you more and more?
No, absolutely. It was very evident that my performance was better if I had my own scheduling, right? So yeah, the results were good. I felt good about my job. I felt more freedom. So I think naturally it was just easier to get my tasks done because I really enjoyed having that trust from them. So of course I didn't want to let them down or take advantage in any way. And it was working. So it especially worked for me. And then slowly the policy started to change. And, you know, a lot of people were like, "Oh, I would like to work from home sometimes." And so they just started integrating those policies in and it actually became part of their contracts before I left the company.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, that's actually a great point, is this idea about policy, right? So when they first started doing this, maybe they didn't have a policy in place, or maybe they had something, but maybe not fully developed. How did that process evolve? Like, so, one of the things that so many companies do is they maybe jump into remote work without really thinking about the longer term impact. It's, so and so needs to stay home with a sick child, so they're going to take a few days off, or somebody's on vacation or traveling and we need to be able to stay in touch, but they don't really think about sort of what that might look like if it was longer term. And so in your case, where you started doing this, but you sort of eased them into this idea of remote work, how did those policies develop, or did they have something to begin with?
So they definitely didn't have anything. It was just kind of a wing it situation. Like they were willing to accommodate even the morning of, if you called up and said, hey, I have to stay home today because an electrician is coming, or you have something, you have to collect a package or something. So they were pretty good about doing that on the fly. And they were very adverse to having the policy there because they didn't want it to become a habit. And that was strictly just based on fear and the way that the office was structured. Because of course, like most companies, they were trying to invest in having a really nice culture in the office. They had a great location for us. They made it beautiful. They gave us allowances to buy whatever we needed, whatever equipment we needed to make things really great for the office. So I think a lot of the fear was, okay, well, if we can't control the culture and people start working from home, we're going to have all these empty desks in this office that we're trying to curate a culture for. So there was resistance in the beginning, but then they realized that there was ways to incorporate it in where it's a little bit more controlled. And once that was something that they saw that there was a demand for, then they started creating the contracts and also creating the policies. So that looked a little bit more like, of course, naturally, everyone's going to gravitate to Fridays and Mondays because that gives you a nice long weekend, right? So what they would do is they would do staggering. So you could choose a certain amount of days of the month, and they would have to be staggered. So you wouldn't be allowed the same day every week that you took, or the same day every month. So one time it's a Monday, one time it's a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, et cetera, all the way through. And then that kind of kept people in the office. And then you wouldn't have like a Friday where there's one person at a desk and this great office is just sitting empty.
Right. Is this typical sort of behavior in your experience working in this space? I mean, is this sort of a typical evolution of a remote work policy, or is it more common for people to really think through this stuff and jump right in?
Well, that is really like a very broad question because it's contingent on the size of your company, of course, how young your company is, right? Sure. So a lot of young companies are adapting it immediately. It's easy for them, especially if you have a small team and people who are wearing a lot of hats, so they can't always be in the office or they're not always required to be at their desk. So I think it's kind of a natural progression for companies that are just starting out. I'd say probably like anybody in the last 5 years is most likely exercising this. Where you see the big difference and where a thought process has to come into play is when you start dealing with larger companies or larger corporates, right? You see this all over the place now. There's lots of articles coming out of like how Microsoft is handling it, how Google handles it. And it is a very, very thorough process. I hire people specifically just to handle that alone. And of course, to make sure that the schedules work and so that they're not having that same experience where the offices just sit empty, on a Friday or something if people don't want to come in, because that becomes extremely expensive for companies, right? Sure. Why are you trying to accommodate, let's say, a team of 200 people in a building and then you are paying for that real estate and in turn, no one's actually showing up to the office. So there's a lot of organization that needs to go in to mitigate that, as well as training. So with a lot of corporates, let's just say older corporates that are trying to become a little bit more appealing to younger talent or talent period, you do see that they're trying to find a way to be attractive, like to attract these people. And with that, you're going to have some people that have been with the company for many years, and they are not at all used to having the ability to work from home. They don't know what that looks like, and they have a very structured lifestyle. Same with their employers, right? They might not know how to exercise that as well. And if you're offering a policy to your employees, you should be practicing it as well. So as as a boss or as a manager, you should also be taking advantage of work from home days or offsite days and things like that. So a lot of training is required for the larger companies. And of course, like some of the people that you're talking to on the podcast and the people that you're interacting with, they're trying to actually fulfill those needs and provide training and courses in ways that people can slowly make that transition, because at the end of the day, it's really going to affect the bottom line of your company. It's going to be more affordable. And in the long run, you're going to have happier employees.
Yeah, no, I think those are all great points. And I mean, are you seeing, I guess, sort of to the extent that companies are doing this, you mentioned, some of it has to do with age, newer companies maybe are more likely to adopt these policies early on. Have you seen, I guess, sort of trends in industries or types of companies that might leverage remote more than others? I mean, it seems like maybe manufacturing, it's not going to be the biggest or best thing for their workforce. Obviously, they need to be in a factory or something. But, it seems like tech companies are sort of leading the charge on this stuff, because maybe they're the first to adopt tech. But I mean, are you seeing industries that are staying away from remote completely, or industries that are getting into it?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there with tech is a big one, obviously. But essentially, any job that you can do from a computer allows for remote work, right? If you need to be on site, if your job requires like any kind of manual labor, of course, that's not going to be something that's going to fit the job. Like a doctor can't really work remotely, with the exception of robots. And I know that there are some remote tools that people are using for rural areas and stuff. So there is that possibility. So technically, I guess that would fall in the remote realm. But if you have to be on site, then no, it's not going to be for that person or for that industry, right? Sure. Tech is absolutely embracing it, and it kind of comes with the territory, though, right? So as glamorous as it all sounds, like at the end of the day, you are tied to your laptop. You're tied to your computer. And that's not the most glamorous existence, right? We're doing some great things. We're changing the world, but you are sitting hunched over at a laptop. So that does take a lot out of you. And, maybe you're not feeling so good. There's a lot of health troubles that come along with that. So what is a way to mitigate that? And I think this whole remote movement is a way to change that a little bit, give people a bit more value for what they're doing, and again, to get more out of life, so that they don't mind draining themselves in that capacity. Not to sound too morbid, but at the end of the day, I think that's why there's such a movement. Is people are very affected by sitting at their computers all day, right? So why not do that while you're outside or in Bali or wherever it is that people want to go these days? Why not do it from there? If you are performing, if you're meeting your goals, if your employers are happy, then you may as well be where you want to be.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, location wise, even if it is from home or whatever, you find, and maybe this is your experience as well, but I know, like, for me, I will often work really long days, but I don't generally feel that burned out. I don't feel that tired from the work I'm doing. Like, I sort of enjoy the work I'm doing. And a big part of that is my flexibility, the fact that I can kind of hit it when I'm feeling like hitting it. And I think because of that flexibility, for me, I'm actually allowed to be more productive than I might be sitting in an office all day, where I get drained from social interactions and just people being everywhere and noise and all this stuff. For me, being able to sort of work remotely and be, even in my home office or a co-working facility or something like that, being able to sort of do it when it best fits my mood. I don't mind taking the text or the Slack at 10 at night, because like, it doesn't feel like work. And so where I think for somebody who has sort of that more regimented, 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 kind of schedule, might be a little more susceptible to that burnout if they were working, 14 hours a day in the office or 16 hours a day in the office.
No, absolutely. And it sounds like yourself, right? And I definitely know myself. I can definitely be a distracted person, like, laundry or whatever. Today I was looking at houses that I wanted to buy online. You do get pulled in certain directions, but at the end of the day, I know that when I am booming, I can get more done in 2 hours than I could in an 8-hour office day at home. So I know that about myself. And that kind of feeds into what you were asking earlier with companies training employees as well. Again, you're hearing it from everyone. I'm sure it's not for everyone. Remote is not for everyone. Everybody is very different. Just like you have a different learning styles, you also have a different work style. right? I don't mind noise. I can handle chatter around me or music and things like that. Some people need absolute silence and need to completely buckle down. So just as people learn differently, they also work differently. So again, remote work is extremely, you have to have self-motivation to do it. You have to be, you have to have a good schedule and be able to manage your time properly. And not everybody can do that. Some people need to walk in, sit down, and that time is for work.
Yeah, and I think that that's a good point. There's so much, I guess, I don't know if it's misinformation or what it is, but there's this idea out there a lot of times that remote work is this idea of sort of, loafing on the beach and doing your work. Not to say that that couldn't happen, but I think that, the guy that's stuck in the office, if it's your manager or whomever, gets that image in their head, this idea that you're just going to go loaf and enjoy live the great life while I'm sitting back at the office. I think that sort of puts a negativity or adds sort of a negative spin to the idea of using remote. And so many people start thinking of remote as a perk of the job instead of just the job. And I think that that's a real problem when people are starting to implement policies and things like that. They somehow compartmentalize remote work as this, perk that you get, or this is this bonus
treat.
Yeah. Instead of the idea that you're still just doing your job, you just happen to be doing it from somewhere else. And so I don't know if that's something that you see in the work you're doing, but it's something I've come across more than once.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's a good point as well when you even want to talk about salaries. So some people are taking advantage of that. Some companies take advantage of that and think that, okay, well, if I'm offering remote to this person, then maybe I can get a better deal because they'll be so grateful that they don't have to come to the office. I can actually undercut them when it comes to their salary. So that's where you see where some employers are still treating it like it is, like you say, a perk, or that person should feel very grateful to have that opportunity. When at the end of the day, some of the access to remote employees can give you better quality or more talented people because you've just broadened your pool and your workforce pool to international rather than the city that your company's in, right? So that is something that I think needs to change with the perspective of like you said, it being a perk of the workplace. It just needs to be a standard now because with the information we have, you can't deny that it's important, the statistics that are out there to give people a better quality of life. Like sitting in a car and commuting 90 minutes a day is not good. It's not. If you're on the train, I know some people enjoy being on the train and reading and they get things done and that's great, but that's not me. I feel like that is time I'd rather have doing things that are important to me, not just my job, right?
Yeah.
So again, those are things that employers need to consider as well, because the health of their employees is always going to affect the quality of work that they get, which feeds directly into the company, which means success. And until that loop is closed and people fully understand that, I think you're always going to have a bit of a disconnect with employer-employee relationships and again, success of companies.
Have you seen in your experience working with like different tech companies and things like that, have you noticed that companies who begin with sort of a remote first attitude and understand remote wholly and completely versus some maybe older company or older industry that's trying to now glom onto remote work as, almost as a perk for, trying to retain people or attract new people. Have you noticed that the companies that sort of begin on the right foot seem to be better about this idea of remote as a perk and maybe are a little less abusive of the ability to undercut somebody?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's not so many examples out there. Like, again, you probably know the companies, and I'm not going to name them because I always use them as examples and I they don't deserve any more shout outs from me. So I'll just say that there are a few companies that are doing it very well, but they have built the company just like anyone builds a company. There's so much organization involved. Of course, like how your documents are stored online, like onboarding materials when you're not actually physically with a person that you're hiring. So there is a lot that goes into that. So yeah, they're definitely doing it better in the sense that they don't treat it like a perk. That's just how it is. And they definitely have the companies that I'm thinking of have salary transparency. Which I always think is a great idea with most companies anyway, because it gives everybody an idea of what's going on in the world and what they're worth and what to ask for. And so I think they are trying to be more modern and give the employees what they want. And so that's where the perks kind of come in. And that's what I would define as perks, like being able to have, a certain amount of money that you can use every month to go to a co-working space, or if you want to get a nice chair for your home office or things like that. That's what the perks should be, not, where are you comfortable doing your work? Like, you need to be here in this office. So I think the companies that are embracing it fully have it down to a science. But of course, with that comes other problems. So, like loneliness or not being able to interact with people on a daily basis. And so where they're doing really great things, they're still trying to figure out how to make it perfect, and how to mitigate the other issues that come along with remote work.
Well, and I think, you were talking about it earlier with your, your work experience, the sort of cultural aspects, right? That your company was trying to control their culture and things like that versus this, Wild West culture where everybody's sort of making their own way. How important do you think it is for, we mentioned already, and I think it just, is worth beating into the ground, that the idea of the remote work isn't for everybody. And I think sometimes, at least for me, as I advocate for remote work, it may come off as I'm saying, well, this is the future of work. Everybody will be working remotely, and it should be for everyone. And but I think that there is so much, I guess, culture being built around this stuff. I guess what I'm trying to determine is how much of it is authentic. Does that make sense? So like, we've got this, the people who are adding on remote work now, and it seems like it's very common for people to sort of add it because they think they need to versus add it because they should. And so I wonder if you had any insights on sort of when is the right time or the wrong time to include remote?
Well, I think the right time is now. So yeah, I think everybody should definitely be allowing for it. And again, that doesn't mean that you have to have a full-time employee that's remote. If it's just incorporating home office or allowing for people to, maybe have an extra week a month where, an extra week a year where they're able to work from wherever they want, without it being withdrawn from their holidays. I think that that's a nice incentive, of course, or a perk, if you will, for companies to do it. But at the end of the day, I'm going to be honest, I don't think there's one company out there that's really completely focused on, I just want happy employees because, kumbaya. I don't think that's the case. I think it all comes down to the bottom line. And that is, okay, if our employees are happy, that means more money for our company. And that's what we're about. So then they try to problem solve. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think bringing it in, it's more because they have to, because that's the way the world is moving. And a lot of companies kind of do it later than they should. It's usually the case. Nobody likes change. Even corporations don't like change. They don't want to adapt to the market, but people that are doing it, it's because they have to, not because, wow, this is the way of the future.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And actually a great segue into this sort of next question. So the thought that I had is, what can we do to make things easier? Or like, what are the incentives for traditional or, maybe a little bit older co-located offices to start embracing remote? And how does it affect their bottom line? It's very true. We have this knack of trying to, personify businesses that they're our friends or, and they do all these nice things for us. And they're, we're applying these human characteristics to business, but ultimately they can't, keep the doors open or keep their virtual doors open if there's no money coming in. So obviously business is the thing. So what can we do to sort of make remote work easier to adopt by companies?
So that's an interesting question. It has to start at the top, which again, the company needs to commit to it, whether it be, it's going to be a hybrid company, partial remote or full remote. They have to commit to it from the top down. Because again, if people feel like they have to ask for permission for things, they're probably not going to, and then they're just going to slowly become resentful toward their job, right? So
Sure.
It's just the way that people are. They're not as outgoing and they don't ask for what they need. So trying to understand the needs of your employees beforehand is key, and then committing to it, right? And so you kind of mentioned having these co-located offices and how that might work and why that might be a financial benefit. And this is what we're seeing now with these corporates, right? So first they adopt remote work or work from home office days, and then they're seeing their spaces are sitting empty. which a lot of people are going, oh my God, like on average, it costs in New York City, I think $15,000 per seat in any office, right? So for everybody sitting there, it costs $15,000 a year. That can be very expensive. And if those are all sitting empty, you can easily calculate that into money lost. So what a lot of companies are starting to do is actually dismantle headquartered locations or multiple locations. So if back in the day, having like an office building in the middle of Manhattan was a status symbol of your company, right? So people are starting to come away from that now. You see a lot of companies are having campuses located all over the world, like Google or Microsoft, which I think is actually a fantastic idea. Kind of going into these hubs and setting up little areas that are basically set up to accommodate every type of work style you can think of. So of course that's the bigger scale, right? Like those are massive companies that have the capability of doing that. But if you think of it on another scale, like the companies that I currently work with, they're getting rid of their headquarters in many cities, and then they're going to allow for their teams to work how they want within the cities that they had a presence already. So if they want to go and get co-working space memberships, or if they want to work from home, they're going to allow for that. And then they would have a central location where people can decide if they want to meet up with 4 of their colleagues that day, or if a meeting is to be had. And so renting space ad hoc as you need it for your meetings or for gatherings or events within your company is kind of where the trend is going now. And of course, at the end of the day, that's going to save you tons of money, because people are just, paying for what they use as opposed to paying for something that they're committed to for the next 10 years. It's going to cost the company millions.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And so can you maybe talk a little bit about, what these flexible situations look like? I mean, I think we talk about co-working a lot, sort of the idea of working at a WeWork or something like that. But what other options are available to us? Like, are there networks of office space or, other flexible workspaces that are available to employers?
Okay, so with all of these different companies that are out there, so we'll use Regis as an example. Like, they've been around for forever, since before I was born. So these are places that have taken the co-working concept and just rented offices out and meeting rooms and things like that. It just wasn't very sexy, if you will. Like, they're just like white walls, sometimes no windows. You go in, there's a boardroom, but that's technically co-working, right? Sure. And then you've seen these shifts where people are trying to accommodate different cultures, like we talked about. So you have the WeWorks or the mind spaces of the world, like these people that are going multiple locations all over the place and trying to curate an experience for you. So the thing about that is that everybody has a different style of how they want their company culture to be set up. And of course, a level of professionalism. So it's extremely variable. When you talk about co-working, everyone kind of just thinks you're sitting at a desk with your laptop. That's definitely not the case. You can go into someone's house, for example. There's people that have it set up where you're just working in someone's living room, and then you can go into buildings that have like high security, super professional, concierge, free coffee and food. I've been to some really amazing places. So, and of course, like going to a Google campus or something like that. So the options kind of are endless. But what I do find is a lot of the companies that are trying to get away from that corporate feel still tend to gravitate a little bit more to more corporate co-working spaces that are set up like a Regis or design offices and things like that. So I think instead of, again, having these I don't want to say membership, but maybe, like if you're just assigned to a WeWork, maybe not everyone in your company wants to work like that, right? Sure. So again, having access to a variety of spaces, I think, is where it's at, and to let people choose a little bit how they're going to be working. I think that's what's going to make people happy at the end of the day, because some people hate WeWork, and then some people hate going into a tech space. It's just tech only. And you don't always want to be surrounded by that, right? Like, what if you're in the marketing department or the creative department? Maybe you want to be around people that are a little bit more like-minded. So sure. I think trying to find that, and then employers allowing for people to discover that and have that freedom as if they're getting the job done. I think that's where it should go.
Right. Well, and that makes
Yeah.
sense, right? I mean, flexibility is flexibility, sort of at
Yeah.
all stages, right? I mean, if you start dictating that you must work at the Regis facility, and
Hmm.
nothing against Regis or whatever their facilities, but I mean, if that's what you're looking for, is something that looks more like a law office or something like that, and that
Hmm.
sort of fits in line with your stuff, that's fine. But it sort of defeats the purpose of being totally flexible if you're now mandating that you must sort of look a certain way or feel a certain way. But to that extent, how do companies keep their culture together? If you're
Hmm.
so disparate, if you're allowed to go be the WeWork or you're allowed to be the Regis, how do we, what things can a business control in their culture?
Yeah, so this is a very good question because it depends on what it is that you're looking for. Like, if you have a really great company ethos, if you are relaying the message of your company and also what your values are, and your employees understand that, that is what your culture is, right? So a lot of people miss the mark there. If people are feeding into what it is that you're trying to do as a company every day, whether they're with their colleagues or not, that is your company culture. Setting up a ping pong table or a pool table or having beers on a Friday is not company culture, right? That's, a lot of people even feel obligated to those things, right? So that's what the most important thing is to make sure that everybody understands what the goal is. Everybody knows what they're working toward at the end of the day, where the company is expected to be, and what your goals are and how they contribute to the bigger picture. That's what your company culture needs to focus on. And of course, that can be done remotely. That's done every day. If you want to take work out of the equation, think of all of these different communities that are online, right? There's tons of communities, people that have never met each other that maintain a really great connection with people all over the world, people that build video games together out of hobby and stuff like that. So if you have a common goal and everyone understands it, then I think that's all that matters. And that's what you need to build your culture around. If it comes down to doing fun things as a group together, like there's lots of companies that are fully remote that do a one-off retreat, and all the money they save on real estate they spend on this retreat, and they go somewhere amazing. They pay for everybody's flights, and they just have like a weekend long party where everyone's going crazy and they all get to meet each other. And it's like, hey, you're the person I talk to every day about this and this from this team or whatever. You're meeting someone from Brazil, or everyone's coming from the US to Greece or whatever. And that's something that everyone gets to look forward to, and it's a great perk, if you will, of the company. But again, culture has to really be defined by the values, I would say, of the company. And when people understand that, you're off to the races.
Well, I think that is an awesome distinction, because I think that this is one of the things that I come across the most, and I'm probably even guilty of making the mistake of talking about cultural implications or the culture of a company more in the frame of, these little add-ons or the things they do, or, they have a quirky attitude or whatever, and thinking about these sort of surface level things as being culture, when, to your point, the idea is that it really is much more deep than that. It's these values that are held dear, usually by the founders of the company, and maybe it's something that evolves over time within an organization. But it's much deeper than that surface level stuff. And I have clients, people that I consult with, that one in particular that's very guilty of doing this kind of thing, where well, everybody in this space has a ping pong table, so let's go get one. And now everybody's got lunch, and I think it's such a tell, because they, this particular place stocks up their fridges and they have all the food and everything available to everybody. But maybe a third of the products are all like double caffeine, energy, whatever. And it sort of feeds this culture of, well, plan on working overtime, that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And it sort of feeds this expectation that you will be there after hours, and, we'll support you in being there after hours, but just plan on it. And I don't think that that's a super healthy approach.
No, absolutely not. I think that for starters, we have contracts
Sure.
that tell us we don't have to do that. And again, if you are feeling obligated to stay somewhere over time, that's not a culture that you want to be a part of. And of course, like I think that as an employer, you're definitely missing the mark, because if you want to actually break down the productivity in that time, you're going to probably see that you're not getting any output, right? I know that people here in Germany, the culture is very very interesting where like if the boss is there, people won't leave until the boss leaves. And so if someone's sitting there until 7 p.m. at night because the boss decided to stay late and work, I got a feeling that they're not actually doing anything. They just want to appear as if they're working.
Sure.
So if that's what people are still striving towards, then that's a very old school approach, right? Where I think employers need to, again, value to value the work-life balance, right? And that is if you have kids or a husband or a wife or whatever, Netflix to get home to at 6 p.m., if that's in your contract, you should be allowed to go without having anything held against you, right? And I do think that is a really difficult change, right? Because we just came out of this startup boom where that was the culture. People were defined by their work, how late they stayed, and we're building this, and this is amazing, right? That changed really rapidly. Like I feel like that happened within a 2-year period where people got burnt out very quickly, and then they're like, wait, no, there's more to life than this. I want to smell the roses, and I'm really going to start taking advantage of my personal time. And that's what's of value to me. I don't care that there's a ping pong or beer or all this stuff provided to me at work. I want to go home.
Yeah.
So as an employer, you have to be dialed into that. And again, being present in the office does not necessarily mean productive output.
Yeah, no, I think that's so true. And I work in the advertising and marketing space, and this idea that sort of, there's some, I guess, accolade or some attention to be paid or something when you work crazy shifts, or you're the last guy at the office, or, you worked overnight to get something done and hit some deadline, and not once because you had to, but because this happens all the time and it's poor planning throughout your, the normal career. It's such a cultural part of that industry, so I'm glad to hear it burned out in tech, but I hope advertising is not far behind. So because that's a brutal one. So let's go back a little bit. So your story about how you sort of got into remote work might be sort of a good place to start with this sort of next line of questioning. So one of the things as companies are starting to move into this, and I believe this is some of the work that you do, is helping companies transition into flexible work and allowing people and starting to build the policies and things that allow them to do so. And through the work you do at your company, it seems that you're doing a lot of coaching or helping these companies start to make a transition into flexible work. And I wonder if you could talk a little about what that's like, getting people, to move from one spot to another. Just as you said earlier, companies don't like change, just like people don't. And, but people are recognizing it and they're having to change, and people like you are helping them through that transition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what is that like, and do I enjoy it? So it's difficult. So talking to companies that, again, don't see the benefit of this, or they're not quite there, or it's on the, it's in the pipeline, whatever it is a difficult sell. And I do feel a little preachy at times, for sure. And that's not always fun. It's better to work with companies, of course, that are ready to make the move, rather than working with, employers or managers that are like, okay, I guess we're implementing this policy now, and they're not so excited about it. So it's really important, like I said, to have the top-down influence. So if you get your managers buying into it, the owners of the company, the founders, whoever it is, if they buy into it and they understand the value, then they're going to start preaching it a little bit more internally. And then that's when you're going to start seeing a change with the employees. And they will definitely latch onto it because it's something they want. But they're going to take their cues from the top, right? Because they always still want to be able to impress or please their managers. So a lot of what we do is actually showing them where they can, of course, save money, how it's going to benefit their company, comparing it to other companies that have done it. And that's what companies want to see, like we talked about before. They want to see the bottom line. So how is this actually going to affect my company, the value, the business, and the money aspect of things, while in turn, making us attractive, trendy, and interesting so that we can continue to attract talent. So we aren't really in the training sector. Like, I'm not in the training sector. It just kind of happens because, again, people have a lot of questions, and I'm in it. I am a remote worker, and I've been doing it for a long time. So I naturally just end up in that role. A lot of what I do, the articles I write, are about that experience as well. So there's definitely an education component to it. But what we're more into is trying to teach people that location isn't everything, and basically you can work from wherever it is that you want to be. If it's close to your home, if it's from your home, or if you want to go to Bali, or if you want to go somewhere obscure for 3 months, you should be able to do that. And how can we find a space that's really going to inspire and accommodate enough of a professional environment for that person to do their best work?
Have you found, in this work, have you found that for most people, they make this transition and it's pretty successful? It sort of lives up to the hype, or are you seeing problems pop up on occasion? And if so, what causes them?
Yeah. So no, I think people are really responding well to it. I think it's still early days. Of course, this has been going on for a long time, but early days for actual statistics, right? Because people are just starting to record this and trying to get some information so that we can start pulling some studies out of the internet, right? Because there isn't tons and tons of data out there. So with that, I think that there's of course always negatives, and that comes from lack of organization. If you're super organized and you're structured and you know what you want to do and you make this, like, this is a goal of our company, we're going to make it work, we're going to execute it properly, then it's probably going to be successful. Of course, you need to have a feedback loop, right? And find out what's working from your employees. Don't just put a policy in place and let it run. Follow up with people. Is this working? What would you do differently? What would you prefer? Getting feedback from the people who are experiencing it and getting them to talk more about what their wants and needs are is the best thing for the company, and if you do that, remember, this is the first line of defense of your business. These are your employees. They're dealing with all of your customers. If if they're giving a good impression, your company's going to be okay. So even though people are very hesitant to invest in their employees and make sure they're happy, it's really a smart thing to do, because at the end of the day, it's going to mean more money.
Well, cool. Well, I think that is a great place to sort of wrap this thing up. Let's talk a little bit about where can people find out more about you, the work you're doing over at Upflex, generally if they want to follow you or get to know you and maybe reach out and ask questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm an avid LinkedIn user. So if anyone wants to add me on there, they're definitely welcome to. So Erin Westover. And I am in Berlin, Germany. So that's where you'll find my network. And yeah, so Upflex, we're a company we founded in New York City about 2 years ago now. And we're definitely getting into the location independent sector through an app. So where companies can access an app provided to their employees so that they can book spaces no matter where they are for whatever their needs are, meeting rooms, desks, or if they want a private office kind of thing. So another way to accommodate remote teams or corporates that are looking to offer a little bit more freedom and flexibility and a variety to their teams.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So thank you so much for doing this, Erin. I'm really grateful for your time. I think you gave us a lot of good information. A lot of the episodes in this series of podcasts have been more worker-centric. And so I felt like this was a great conversation about sort of how employers can do a better job of getting into or breaking into remote work. And I really appreciate your insights on that.
No, absolutely. And thank you for having me on the show. And anytime, I'd be happy to come back. And I look forward to hearing all the other guests.
All right. I look forward to it. Thanks so much, Erin.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thanks, Ryan.
Oh, you everything. I don't know you anything.